The story of the Ottoman Empire can be told in many ways. It can be told through its sultans, its battles, or its grand buildings, but it can also be told through its money. And for centuries the most important piece of money was a small silver coin. It was called the Akçe. This coin was the backbone of the Ottoman economy. It paid soldiers, it bought bread in the market, it built mosques that reached for the sky. The Akçe was more than just currency, it was a symbol of the Sultan's power. Each new ruler would mint his own coins, a declaration to the world that he was now in charge. The coin's journey from a bright, pure piece of silver to a debased and forgotten token mirrors the empire's own rise and fall. The very first Akçe was minted around the year 1326. This was during the reign of Orhan Gazi, the second Ottoman ruler, or Bey. His father Osman had founded the dynasty, but it was Orhan who began to build the structures of a real state. A state needs its own money. Before Orhan, the Ottomans and other small Turkish principalities in Anatolia used the coins of other, more powerful empires. They used coins from the Byzantine Empire, or the Mongol Ilkhanate. But Orhan wanted to show his independence. Minting a coin in your own name was a powerful statement. It said, "We are no longer a tribe, we are a power to be reckoned with." And so, in the newly conquered city of Bursa, the first Ottoman mint began its work. These first akçes were small but significant. They were made of nearly pure silver. They weighed about 1.2 grams. On one side, they carried Orhan's name and a prayer. On the other, they often had the kalima, the Islamic declaration of faith. There is no God but God, and Muhammad is his messenger. The design was simple, but its message was clear. This was the money of a new Islamic power in the region. The word akçe itself comes from the Turkish word ak, which means white. It was the little white coin, a fitting name for this shiny piece of silver that would soon spread across 3 continents. Its creation was a milestone, a quiet announcement of the empire that was to come. The choice of silver was important. Gold was for large transactions, for kings and empires. Copper was for small local change. Silver was the metal of daily life and of regional trade. It was the perfect metal for a rising state. The early akçe was a reliable coin. Its silver content was high, and its weight was consistent. People trusted it. This trust was crucial for the growing Ottoman economy. Merchants from Genoa and Venice who traded throughout the Mediterranean began to accept the akçe. It became a respected currency not just within Ottoman lands, but beyond them as well. The little white coin from Bursa was beginning its long journey. The akçe was not created in a vacuum. It was born out of necessity. The early Ottoman state was expanding rapidly. It was a military machine, conquering lands from the Byzantines in the west and other Turkish beyliks in the east. An army needs to be paid. Soldiers, especially the elite janissaries, expected their wages on time. The akçe became the standard unit for military payment. 3 akçes a day was the starting wage for a new janissary in the early days. This regular, reliable payment in silver helped ensure the loyalty of the army. The coin was, in essence, the fuel for the Ottoman conquest. It allowed the sultans to build and maintain a professional fighting force that was unmatched in its time. Beyond the military, the akçe unified the new empire's economy. As the Ottomans conquered new territories, they brought their currency with them. Previously, a merchant traveling through Anatolia might have had to carry several different types of coins. He might have Byzantine coins, Mongol coins, and coins from various small principalities. This made trade complicated. The akçe simplified everything. It became the standard unit of account. Prices for goods, from silk to spices to simple loaves of bread, were all set in akçes. Taxes were also calculated and collected in akçes. This created a single economic zone, binding the diverse conquered lands together under the Sultan's authority. The coin's design also served a powerful political and religious purpose. In the Islamic world, the right to mint coins, the sikka, was one of the 2 traditional prerogatives of a sovereign ruler, the other being the mention of his name in the Friday sermon, the khutbah. By stamping his name on the akçe, the Ottoman Sultan was declaring his sovereignty to his subjects and to the world. The religious inscriptions on the coin reinforced the Sultan's role as a ghazi, a warrior for Islam. The coin was a piece of propaganda that fit in the palm of your hand. Every time someone used an akçe, they were subtly reminded of the Sultan's power and his religious legitimacy. The early importance of the akçe cannot be overstated. It was the foundation upon which the magnificent Ottoman economy of the 15th and 16th centuries was built. It was a stable and respected currency. 40 akçes were typically equal to 1 Venetian gold ducat, a key international currency of the time. This stable exchange rate made international trade easy and profitable. The empire's treasury, filled with akçes from taxes and tributes, funded the construction of incredible buildings like the Topkapi Palace and the great mosques of Istanbul. For 2 centuries, the little white coin was a symbol of Ottoman strength, stability, and prosperity. It was the envy of its neighbors and the pride of the empire. The golden age of the akçe did not last forever. Like the empire itself, the coin faced challenges that changed it over time. The most significant change was a process called debasement. This means the amount of pure silver in the coin was reduced. The government would melt down old, pure coins and mix the silver with a cheaper metal, like copper. Then, they would mint more coins from the same amount of silver. The first major debasement happened during the reign of Sultan Mehmed II, the conqueror of Constantinople. Around 1477, he reduced the akçe's weight from about 1.2 grams to around 1 gram. This was a way to get more money to pay for his vast army and ambitious building projects. This trend of debasement continued for the next 300 years. Each crisis, each costly war, put pressure on the imperial treasury. The sultans often saw debasement as an easy solution. During the long and expensive wars with Persia and the Habsburg Empire in the late 16th and early 17th centuries, the akçe's silver content plummeted. By the early 1600s, it weighed less than half a gram and was made of very poor quality silver. The once white and shiny coin now often looked gray or even black. Its size also shrank. It became a tiny, thin wafer of metal, a shadow of its former self. People started calling it a çürük akçe, or rotten akçe. The coin's design also evolved, though less dramatically than its composition. The early coins of Orhan and his successors were relatively simple. They featured the sultan's name, his father's name, and the mint location. A key design element was the tugra, the sultan's official calligraphic monogram or signature. The tugra became more elaborate and standardized over time. It was a beautiful and complex piece of art, and it served as a guarantee of the coin's authenticity. However, as the coins got smaller and the quality of the minting declined, the inscriptions and the tugra often became crude and difficult to read. Some late-period akçes are so poorly struck that it's hard to tell which sultan minted them. The changes were not always gradual. Sometimes a major monetary reform would happen all at once. For example, in 1687, during a period of severe financial crisis, Sultan Süleyman II introduced a new, larger silver coin called the para. The para was initially valued at 3 akçes. This was a recognition that the akçe had become too small and debased to be useful for many transactions. The akçe was no longer the main silver coin of the empire. It was now a small fraction of a larger unit. This was a major turning point. The akçe continued to be minted, but its role was diminished. It was the beginning of the end for the once mighty coin. Throughout its long history, the akçe was not a single uniform coin. There were many different types and variants, some of which are very rare today. The most common way to categorize akçes is by the sultan who minted them. Coin collectors can trace the history of the Ottoman dynasty through their akçes, from Orhan Gazi to the last sultans of the 17th century who still minted the coin. Each sultan's coin is a small piece of history, bearing his unique tugra. Some sultans ruled for a very long time, like Suleiman the Magnificent, and their akçes are very common. Others ruled for only a few months, and their coins are incredibly rare and sought after by collectors. Another way to classify akçes is by the mint where they were made. The Ottoman Empire had dozens of mints scattered across its vast territory, from Cairo in Egypt to Sarajevo in Bosnia, and from Baghdad in Iraq to Bursa in Anatolia. Each mint had its own slightly different style. The mint's name was usually written on the coin. For example, an akçe might say Duribe fi Konstantiniye, which means struck in Constantinople. Experts can often identify the mint even if the name is not fully readable, based on the style of the calligraphy or other small details. These regional variations tell a story of a decentralized empire, where local traditions influenced even the official currency. Some very interesting and short-lived variants of the Akçe were created for specific purposes. For example, there were special coins minted for the accession of a new sultan. These were often of higher quality, and were distributed to soldiers and officials as a celebratory gift. There were also siege coins, minted in a city under attack to pay the defending soldiers when money from the capital could not get through. These were often crudely made from whatever silver was available, including melted-down plates and jewelry. These emergency coins are extremely rare and tell a dramatic story of survival and conflict. They are a tangible link to some of the most intense moments in Ottoman history. One of the most famous variants was not a type, but a name. In the 15th century, the Akçe of Sultan Bayezid II was known for its high quality and reliable silver content. It became so trusted that people in the Balkans started calling any good silver coin an aspro, from the Greek word aspirin, meaning white. This is the same root as the Turkish akçe. This shows how the Ottoman coin set the standard for quality in the region. In contrast, by the 17th century, the debased akçe was so devalued that new, larger silver coins had to be introduced. The Ottoman government even started using foreign coins, like the Dutch lion dollar and the Spanish real de a ocho, or piece of 8, to fill the need for reliable silver currency. The long decline of the Akçe was not caused by one single thing. It was honestly the result of a complex mix of economic, political, and global events that put immense pressure on the Ottoman state. One of the biggest factors was, well, constant warfare. The 16th and 17th centuries were a time of almost continuous conflict for the empire. The Ottomans were fighting long and incredibly expensive wars against the Habsburgs in Hungary and the Safavids in Persia. These wars required massive armies, and those armies needed to be paid. When tax revenues were not enough, the sultans and their viziers often turned to debasement as a quick way to generate funds. They were essentially printing money, but in metal form. Another major blow came from the so-called price revolution of the 16th century. After the Spanish conquered the Americas, vast amounts of silver from mines in places like Potosi, which is in modern-day Bolivia, began to flood into Europe. This huge new supply of silver caused its value to drop. This meant that prices for everything else went up. This global inflation hit the Ottoman Empire hard. The government's expenses, like soldiers' salaries, were rising. But its income, based on taxes set in akçes, was losing its real value. The silver in an akçe was simply worth less than it used to be. This forced the government to debase the coin even further just to keep up. Internal political instability also played a pretty big role. The 17th century, in particular, was a time of weak sultans and powerful palace factions. Grand viziers and other officials often used debasement for their own personal gain, enriching themselves at the state's expense. The Janissaries, the elite infantry corps, were a constant source of pressure. When they were unhappy with their pay, which was losing value due to inflation and debasement, they would often revolt. These revolts were called Kul Tayfesi Ayaklanmaları, or uprisings of the servants. Sometimes they would demand the execution of the official they blamed for the bad coins. In 1622, the Janissaries even murdered Sultan Osman II, in part because of his attempts at monetary and military reform. Finally, the changing structure of the world economy worked against the Akçe. In the early centuries, the Ottoman Empire controlled many of the key trade routes between East and West. But with the discovery of new sea routes around Africa, European powers could trade directly with India and the Far East, bypassing Ottoman lands. This meant less trade and less tax revenue for the empire. The economic center of gravity was shifting from the Mediterranean to the Atlantic. The Ottoman economy, and its little silver coin, struggled to adapt to this new world. The debasement of the Akçe was not just a sign of financial mismanagement, it was, really, a symptom of a much deeper crisis facing the empire. The process of making an akçe was a skilled craft, performed in mints across the empire. It began with silver, which came from mines in the Balkans or was acquired through trade and taxes. The master of the mint, the Darfeyn Amini, would oversee the entire operation. First, the silver was melted and assayed to determine its purity. It was then mixed with copper to create an alloy of the legally required standard. This molten metal was cast into long, thin bars. These bars were then cut into small, blank discs of metal, called planchets. Each planche had to be the correct weight. Workers would weigh them individually, clipping off small bits of excess metal to get them just right. Once the planches were ready, they were struck into coins. This was done by hand for centuries. A worker would place a planche between two dies. A die is a piece of hardened metal with the coin's design engraved on it in reverse. The bottom die, called the anvil die, was fixed in place. The top die, or hammer die, was held by hand. Another worker would then strike the top die with a heavy hammer. This single powerful blow would impress the designs from both dies onto the soft metal planche, creating the coin. This method, known as hammer striking, required great skill to produce a clear and centered coin. The quality could vary greatly, which is why some akçes are beautifully clear, while others are off-center or weakly struck. In daily life, the akçe was the workhorse of the economy. It was the coin you used to buy bread, vegetables, or a cup of coffee. A worker in Istanbul in the 16th century might earn 10 to 12 akçes a day. The price of a standard loaf of bread was set by the government at 1 akçe. This meant a worker could feed his family, but there wasn't much left over. People carried their coins in small pouches or purses, called kese. Because the coins were so small, especially in later periods, losing them was a real concern. The constant debasement created confusion and anxiety. People would weigh coins and check them carefully, as the official value might not match the real silver value. The akçe was used for everything from paying taxes to giving charity. The government kept its accounts in akçes. The budget of the entire empire, from military spending to the costs of the Sultan's kitchen, was calculated in this small silver unit. Even large transactions were often expressed in akçes, although they might be paid in gold coins. For example, the price of a house might be quoted as 50,000 akçes. But the actual payment would be made with a smaller number of gold sultani coins. The akçe was the fundamental measure of value, the yardstick against which everything else was measured, for the better part of 4 centuries. The akçe did not exist in isolation. The Ottoman Empire was a crossroads of trade, and many different coins circulated alongside it. The akçe's main domestic rivals were the gold sultani and the copper mongar. The sultani was first minted by Mehmed the Conqueror and was modeled on the Venetian ducat. It was a high-purity gold coin used for large transactions, international trade, and storing wealth. The mongar was a simple copper coin for very small purchases, like a single vegetable or a piece of fruit. The relationship was hierarchical. A certain number of mongars equaled 1 akçe, and a certain number of akçes equaled 1 gold sultani. This relationship, however, was constantly changing due to the debasement of the akçe. In the international arena, the akçe competed with several major European coins. The most important was the Venetian gold ducat. For centuries, the ducat was the dominant currency of Mediterranean trade, known and trusted everywhere for its consistent weight and purity. The early Ottoman sultani was a direct response to the ducat, an attempt to create a coin of equal standing. In the silver trade, the akçe faced competition from coins like the Austrian thaler, and, later the Spanish real de a ocho, or piece of 8. These were large, heavy silver coins, much bigger than the akçe. As the akçe was repeatedly debased, its reputation suffered compared to these foreign rivals. While an early, pure akçe was a respected coin, a 17th-century akçe was not. Merchants, both foreign and Ottoman, began to prefer using the large, reliable European silver coins for significant business deals. The Ottoman government itself eventually had to acknowledge this reality. It began to accept taxes in foreign coins, and even re-stamped some foreign coins, like the Dutch lion dollar, Asadi Gurush, for use within the empire. This was a clear sign that the akçe had lost its place as the premier silver coin in its own lands. The story of the akçe and its rivals is a lesson in the importance of trust in money. The Venetian ducat remained stable for 500 years, which is why it was so successful. The Ottoman akçe, on the other hand, was sacrificed for the short-term needs of the state. This damaged public confidence and hurt the economy in the long run. People began to hoard good-quality old coins or foreign coins while trying to spend the debased new coins as quickly as possible. This is an economic principle known as Gresham's law. Bad money drives out good. The decline of the akçe shows this principle in action over several centuries. Certain akçes have become famous, not for their value, but for the stories they tell. One of the most sought after is the Akçe of Cem Sultan. Cem was the younger son of Mehmed the Conqueror. When Mehmed died in 1481, Cem fought his brother Bayezid for the throne, and lost. He fled into exile in Europe, where he became a pawn in the hands of the Pope and European kings for 14 years. During his brief struggle for power, Cem minted a small number of akçes in his name, in the cities of Bursa and Konya. These coins represent a what-if moment in Ottoman history. They are the monetary ghosts of a sultan who never was, and they are incredibly rare. Another fascinating story involves the so-called Ottoman Akçe and the Janissaries. In the early 17th century, the debasement was so severe that the soldiers' pay was almost worthless. The Janissaries, feeling cheated, stormed the palace. They were not just an angry mob, they were sophisticated enough to understand the monetary issue. They often targeted the officials responsible for the debasement, such as the master of the mint or the chief financial officer. In one famous incident, they dragged the accused official to the public square and demanded justice from the sultan. These events show that the quality of the Akçe was not just an economic issue, it was a matter of life and death and political stability. There's also the tale of the Akçe and the great architect Mimar Sinan. Sinan designed over 300 major structures for the Ottoman sultans, including the magnificent Süleymaniye Mosque in Istanbul. The construction of these massive buildings was a huge expense, all meticulously recorded in the imperial account books in Akçes. The records for the Süleymaniye Mosque survive to this day. They list the cost of every stone, every nail, and every worker's daily wage, all in Akçes. These account books provide an incredible window into the 16th century economy. They show us exactly what the empire's money could build, and how the Akçe was the fundamental building block of Ottoman civilization's grandest achievements. Finally, there is the simple story told by countless Akçes found by archaeologists. Coins are lost or buried all the time. When a hoard of Akçes is discovered, it acts like a time capsule. The dates on the coins can tell historians about the flow of money and the extent of trade. The location can tell us about an old trade route or a forgotten village. A hoard buried under the floor of a burned-out house might tell a tragic story of a war or a raid, where a family hid their life savings and never returned. Each lost coin is a small, silent witness to history, a personal connection to the anonymous people who used it centuries ago. By the late 17th century, the Akçe was in its twilight. It had become so small and its silver content so low that it was almost useless. The introduction of the para, a larger silver coin worth 3 Akçes, was the first major step in replacing it. Soon, even the para was not enough. The Ottoman state needed an even larger silver coin to compete with the European thalers that were dominating trade. In 1688, the government introduced a large silver coin called the kuruş. The kuruş was initially valued at 40 para, which was equivalent to 120 Akçes. This new coin became the standard of the Ottoman monetary system. The Akçe was now just a tiny fraction of the main unit. The minting of Akçes did not stop immediately. The coin continued to be produced, mainly at the Istanbul Mint, but its role was greatly reduced. It was no longer a coin for major payments or even daily shopping. It was used only for the smallest of transactions and, crucially, as a unit of account in the government's books. For a long time, the imperial budget was still calculated in Akçes, even though the payments were made in kuruş and para. This was a matter of tradition. The accountants were used to the old system, and it took time for the bureaucracy to change. But in the real world, in the markets and in people's pockets, the Akçe was disappearing. The final blow came with a series of monetary reforms in the 18th and 19th centuries. The Ottoman Empire was trying to modernize its military, its government, and its economy. A modern economy needed a modern, stable currency. The old, chaotic system with the debased Akçe at its heart had to go. Sultan Mahmud II, a major reformer, completely overhauled the monetary system in the early 19th century. Although the Akçe may have been technically minted for a few more years as a token coin, its real economic life was over. The kuruş became the official unit of currency, and it remains the basis for the name of Turkey's modern currency today. The Turkish lira is divided into 100 kuruş. The story of the Akçe's demise is a sad one, but it is also a natural one. Currencies come and go. They serve their purpose for a time, and then they are replaced by something new. The Akçe was a coin of the pre-industrial world, a world of hammer-struck silver and imperial expansion. It was born with the empire. It grew to greatness with the empire, and it declined with the empire. Today, the Akçe is no longer money, it is an artifact. It is a piece of history that you can hold in your hand. It tells a 400-year-long story of power, wealth, crisis, and change. It is the ghost of Ottoman silver, the little white coin that built an empire.